In 334 BCE, Alexander of Macedon crossed into Asia with perhaps 35 to 40,000 troops. 11 years later, his conquests stretched from Greece and Egypt to the Indus. His army was tiny compared with the millions of people inside that space. How could a small ruling group conquer enormous regions and keep controlling them after the army moved on? Battles alone cannot answer it. Every victory created harder problems. Troops needed food, distant provinces needed governors, taxes had to reach the center, orders had to reach the frontier, and subject peoples had to cooperate often enough that permanent occupation was unnecessary. Great empires grew when rulers solved conquest, logistics, administration, communication, revenue, and legitimacy together. They weakened when distance, cost, rivalry, and resistance pulled those systems apart. The first requirement was often not a larger army, but preventing opponents from combining. Sargon of Akkad, ruling roughly 2334 to 2279 BCE, expanded against rival Sumerian city-states such as Uruk, Ur, and Lagash. Defeating separate cities was easier than facing one united coalition. Rome used similar political logic in Italy. Some defeated communities received treaties or limited privileges, others lost land, and many supplied soldiers. By treating enemies differently, Rome made a single anti-Roman front harder to sustain. The Mongols also exploited division. When Chinggis Khan attacked the Khwarezmian Empire in 1219, separate columns advanced by different routes, forcing defenders to protect several cities at once. Conquest often began politically: recruit defectors, exploit rivalries, promise privileges, and attack opponents in sequence. A successful conqueror needed each victory to make the next campaign easier. Captured storehouses fed troops. Conquered craftsmen repaired weapons. Local guides revealed roads and water. Subject soldiers increased manpower. Tribute financed the next expedition. Assyrian kings turned annual campaigning into a system. A defeated ruler might remain as a vassal paying silver, horses, grain, or luxury goods. If he rebelled, the territory could become a directly governed province. Rome expanded its manpower by demanding troops from Italian allies. Even after Hannibal destroyed a huge Roman army at Cannae in 216 BCE, Rome refused peace because its wider recruitment network could raise more men. The crucial measure was not one army's size, but the population and resources behind it. Victory pushed armies farther from home. Tens of thousands of soldiers and animals consumed huge quantities of grain, water, and fodder. An army that could win but not eat would disappear without another enemy striking it. Alexander followed coastlines and river valleys when possible, used fleets, and seized major supply centers. The siege of Tyre in 332 BCE required months of engineering, ships, and control of the coast. Persian kings prepared depots, roads, and bridges before major campaigns. Mongol warriors traveled with several horses and relied heavily on pasture, giving them extraordinary speed across grasslands, but less advantage in humid regions without grazing. Rivers, coasts, fertile plains, roads, and pasture-shaped campaigns. Logistics did not merely support conquest, it decided where conquest was possible. Once the army left, a city could rebel. Permanent garrisons everywhere were too expensive. Empires therefore ruled through selected people: governors, local nobles, priests, tax collectors, councils, and military colonies. The Neo-Assyrian Empire converted many conquered lands into provinces, appointed officials, and stationed forces at strategic points. Rebellious populations were sometimes deported and resettled. The Achaemenid Persians often reduced occupation costs by keeping local elites and religious institutions. When Cyrus captured Babylon in 539 BCE, he presented himself through Babylonian royal traditions. Subjects did not need to become Persian. They needed to accept imperial supremacy, provide revenue, and keep routes open. Rome created a ladder of incorporation through allies, colonies, provincial councils, and eventually expanding citizenship. Durable empire was usually a partnership under unequal conditions. Distance threatened every empire. A governor hundreds of kilometers away could hide revenue, build a private army, or ignore orders. Under Darius I, the Achaemenid Empire was organized into provincial units often called satrapies. Satraps collected taxes and raised troops, while royal inspectors and separate military commands limited their independence. The royal road connected Sardis with Susa over roughly 2,400 kilometers, using stations and relay riders to move official information. Rome expanded roads, ports, and a state courier system. Sea transport across the Mediterranean moved bulk goods far more cheaply than long overland hauling. The Mongol Yam used relay stations with horses and provisions across Eurasia. An empire existed in practice only where information could travel reliably. Beyond that, a distant governor could become more powerful than the emperor. Armies, roads, and officials had to be paid. Empires converted different regional economies into predictable revenue. Grain, silver, horses, ships, labor, and soldiers. Achaemenid provinces paid assessed tribute in different forms. Rome taxed provinces and recruited conquered peoples. During the early empire, roughly 25 to 30 legions formed the citizen corps, while large auxiliary forces came from non-citizen populations. At its height, around 117 CE, Rome covered about 5 million square kilometers and may have contained 60 to 70 million people. Only a small fraction were soldiers or central officials. Imperial power came from millions of farmers, workers, and merchants. But extraction had limits. Too little revenue weakened the army. Too much encouraged flight, rebellion, and abandoned land. A successful empire had to take enough to function without destroying the economy that supported it. Force alone was too expensive. Most people had to obey when no soldier was present. Successful empires therefore mixed coercion with legitimacy and practical benefits. Persian kings presented themselves as protectors of order while respecting many local cults. Roman emperors connected military victory, law, and divine favor. Cities gained roads, markets, protection, or political office. Soldiers served for pay, land, or citizenship. Local elites supported the empire because their own status could depend on it. Imperial identities were often layered. A person could remain Egyptian, Jewish, Greek, Gallic, or Syrian while living under Persian or Roman authority. Empires usually lasted longer when they demanded loyalty without trying to erase every local custom. The cheapest empire was not the one that terrorized everyone every day. It was the one that persuaded enough people that cooperation was safer or more profitable than resistance. Ancient sources often exaggerate army sizes. Alexander probably invaded with around 40,000 troops, not hundreds of thousands. At Rome's height, several 100,000 soldiers guarded an empire of perhaps 60 to 70 million people. The Mongol population was also tiny compared with the peoples they conquered. So empires depended on selective control. Garrisons held capitals, crossings, ports, and major roads. Officials supervised revenue. Local authorities handled ordinary disputes. Punishment was concentrated on visible rebellion. Maps can mislead by coloring entire territories uniformly. Imperial control was strongest near capitals, rivers, roads and garrisons, and weaker in mountains, deserts, and borderlands. The real empire was a network of controlled nodes. The ruler did not need equal power everywhere, only enough control over strategic points to move soldiers, information, and taxes. For ordinary people, empire could mean a new tax collector, while language, village elders, and daily work continued. A merchant might gain safer routes. A local noble might keep land by swearing loyalty. A young man might be recruited and sent hundreds of kilometers away. Other communities experienced looting, enslavement, deportation, or colonization. Empires lasted when they created local winners, as well as central rulers. Officials, suppliers, translators, soldiers, and elite families whose status depended on imperial survival. But the same systems created vulnerability. Longer frontiers required more troops required more taxes, and higher taxes increased resistance. Powerful governors gained armies and revenue. Succession crises could turn the network against itself. Alexander conquered faster than he could build institutions. When he died in Babylon in 323 BCE without an accepted adult heir, his generals divided the empire. Assyria fell after civil conflict and coordinated attacks. Nineveh was captured in 612 BCE. The Mongol Empire divided into major khanates as distant branches of the ruling family gained separate interests. Humans built great empires by dividing enemies, making victory finance expansion, feeding armies, ruling through intermediaries, moving information, extracting revenue, recruiting subjects, and making authority legitimate. A brilliant army without those systems produced a conquest. A durable empire required the systems behind the army.